Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Shiri Orion. It's good to have everybody here. We're going to have a full house. Also, we'll give a couple of seconds to let everybody sign on. If you're joining us already, then you can do a few things while we're waiting. First of all, there's going to be some translation in this webinar. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's a picture, an icon of a globe, and just hit English so that you'll be able to hear the translation from Mohammad. And our panelists, if you could just put yourselves on mute for now until we're ready to get started. We have a big joining us today. Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, you can enable your translation. If there's a picture, an icon of a globe at the bottom of your screen, click on English so that you'll be able to understand all of our panelists today. And in just one more minute, we'll get started. You see that more and more people are joining us, and that's great. Okay, I think we're going to get started. For anybody who has not yet turned on their translation services, please do so now. Just on the globe icon, press English. So my name is Shiri Orion. I am the Executive Director of the American Friends of the Parent Circle. And the Parent Circle Families Forum, for those of you joining us for the first time today, is an organization made up of 600 bereaved Israeli and Palestinian families. All of them have lost a loved one to the conflict. All of them have chosen a path of peace and reconciliation rather than revenge. Some of them are joining with us today, depending where you are, and we'll be able to hear directly from them about some of the serious challenges and attacks that we've been facing recently. I'll get to introduce our panelists very soon. I just want to give you a little overview about what we're talking about today. For the past 20 years or so, the Parent Circle has been running a peace education program called what we call dialogue meetings, which basically is having two people, one Israeli, one Palestinian, going into, it could be different kinds of settings. It could be, like a community organization. It could be to adults. It can be a youth group. And what we're focusing on today is Israeli schools. So our members, they go into an Israeli school, usually several classes, and they present their stories, who they are, what their lives are like, who they've lost, and why they made this choice. And we've evaluated this program. It has tremendous positive results on generating empathy. And for many times, it's the first time that an Israeli meets a Palestinian as a human being and not as, someone at a checkpoint or someone on TV or, propaganda or stereotypes that they've heard of. In 2021, we did about 400 dialogue meetings, reaching about 7,000 people. We're the only organization that is allowed to bring Palestinians from the West Bank into Israeli schools, which makes this program even more important. And unfortunately, in the past while, has been more hostility. There's been more fear among the schools, and most recently there have been serious attacks in the form of protests, in the form of threats towards schools and administrators that are making it very difficult for us to continue with this program. We have three guest speakers with us today that I'd love to introduce, and thank you for joining us here today, you guys. We have Yuval Rachamim, who is the Israeli co-director of the Parent Circle. He's also a bereaved son. We have Mohammad al-Baw, who is also a Parent Circle staff member and is one of the very brave Palestinian members who goes into Israeli schools and faces these protests. He's also from a bereaved family. And we have Ofer, who is a high school teacher in the north of Israel and also a past participant of one of our projects. And Ofer is here to share with us his experience around bringing dialogue meetings to his school. So just as a reminder, if you haven't yet already, please click on the globe icon to click English for translation. We're going to show you just a very short clip. It's about 3 minutes. Well, it's longer than 3 minutes, but we're going to show you about 3.5 minutes of it to give you an idea of, what this program is all about and what the schools are facing. And then we'll come back to our guests today. So we're ready for the video. Here we go.
אני אושר, רכז חינוך חברתי בתיכון קריית שרת. הדעות הפוליטיות שלי שונות 180 מעלות ממה שהפורום מייצג. היה לי מאוד מאוד קשה עם מי שאני, עם התחושות שלי, עם איך שאני תופס את עצמי, עם איך שאני תופס את המדינה, בכלל לחשוב להביא פורום כזה לתלמידים שלי.
רוב העם הפלסטיני היום ורוב העם הישראלי לא מכירים את אחד השני. אנחנו רק מכירים את תמונה הקטנה הכי קיצונית על כל הצד. זה מה אנחנו רואים במדיה בצד שלנו וגם בצד הישראלי. וחושבים שכל העם הפלסטיני ככה וכל העם הישראלי ככה ואין מלדבר ואף פעם לא ישלום. זו התמונה היחידה שאנחנו גדלנו עליה.
בשנת 2018, זה בחודש אוקטובר, היינו בחברון, היינו מטפלים בחתונה של איזו ילדה מהבנות שלי. בחזרה, על יד רחלים, זרקו עליי סלעים כאלה, מתנחלים מרחלים. ונגע אבן בראש של אשתי, ונהרגה במקום. זה קשה לי לדבר עליה כבר, היינו ביחד 30 ומשהו שנה.
זה אבא שלי. הרוצחים שלו קנו גרזנים, נסעו מעל 100 קילומטר כדי לרצוח אותו. צריכה להיות שנאה כל כך תהומית, כל כך עמוקה, כדי לא לראות את מי שעומד מולך כבן אדם. והם לא ראו את אבא שלי כבן אדם.
אח שלי פרס, אני והוא גדלנו כמו תאומים בדיוק. פרס בדרך לחברים שלו עשה שיעבור במחסום, היה עובר משם ברגל, לא היה ברכב. אחד מהחיילים שהיו עומדים על מחסום הזה, עד היום אני לא מכיר את החייל הזה, ואני לא יודע על מה חשב החייל הזה שאח שלי בא אליו. החייל הזה ממרחק של 10 או 15 מטר ירה על פרס מספר גדול של כדורים, ופרס נפל ונהרג במקום. רצינו שנלך לאיזה בית משפט, אבל לא הצלחנו. אבל באופן לא ישיר ככה, אמרו לנו בסוף, אנחנו מסתערים על מה קרה לבן שלכם, וזה היה בטעות. לא יודעים שהטעות הזה, כמו שהם אומרים, שזה לא רק הרג את אח שלי, אבל לא הרג את כל המשפחה שלי.
אני לא חושב שאחד מאיתנו בכלל בבית ספר אי פעם בכלל הכיר פלסטיני, או דיבר עם אחד. תגיד, אני בכלל הופתעתי שהוא ידע לדבר עברית, כי אני הנחתי שבן אדם שמגדיר את עצמו פלסטיני לא יטרח אפילו ללמוד עברית וירצה לדבר נטו ערבית.
היה לי חשוב שפעם אחת יישב מולם פלסטיני, יוכלו לשאול אותו שאלות, והוא יוכל להגיב, והוא יוכל לשאול אותם שאלות בחזרה. וגם אם זה יעצבן אותם, וגם אם ירגישו שזה לא נכון, שזה לא מתאים עבורם, עדיין ייווצר כאן איזשהו שיח, והם יוכלו רגע גם לגבש לעצמם את הדעה שלהם. וזה משהו שאני לא יכול להביא לכיתה, בלי גורם חיצוני כמובן.
הרבה מאוד אנשים באו מהמקום הזה של זה לא מספיק חשוב לי לשמוע על הצד השני, כי אני כל כך בטוח בצד שלי.
אפילו אנשים שלא רוצים לדבר בדרך כלל בכיתה, הם היו כל כך מסוקרנים, שהם פשוט היו חייבים להשתתף. זה פשוט היה לדעתי ההרצאה אולי הכי מרתקת שהייתה לנו השנה בכלל.
חד משמעית, אין פה ספק
דיון.
בכלל.
זה היה מאוד מעורב.
22 לי.
Okay, that was to give you a little idea of, or a glance into what our dialogue meetings are about and hear from people from some of the schools themselves. And that was Mohammad in our video, so you got a chance to know him a little bit better too. But Yuval, I'd like to start with you. Oh, before we start though, I just want to say there will be question and answer period, so feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. Yuval, tell us more about, you've been director for a couple of years now, and in the time that you've been director, things have really heated up and taken a turn. Tell us what's the parent circle up against? What are the tactics that you're using, that they're using against the parent circle and against the dialogue meetings, and how are we fighting back? Oh, you're mute, Yuval, you gotta unmute.
Right. Thank you, Shay, for creating this opportunity. A few words about just about myself. I gained my ticket for this organization when I was 8 years old. At 67 at the war, where I lost my father, Avram. And what we're talking about is the transformation that people can go through. I was full of hate. I was not even considering any kind of reconciliation, and all of my childhood I spent dreaming about killing Arabs, you know. And so I know this sentiment, and I know that many Israelis, whether they were hit or not by the conflict, they feel the same way. They do not see the other side. They do not know it. It's not presented as human. And what we are doing with this specific project, we do a lot of projects I'm not going to talk about today, but we go into schools at the exact moment where children are about to finish their formal education, and they don't study a lot about the conflict during their high school. But we do give them a glimpse of the reality of the conflict, not the history, not the politics. Coming into school, into the class, one Israeli and one Palestinian that lost a loved one, and sharing the story of the journey that we went through from the moment of the announcement until the decision of taking a side, of fighting for peace. This is the transformation we want to let them see, and to let them also see that everybody can go through this kind of change. You just need to listen and to see the other. And it's working. And the fact that it's working is really dangerous for many people. I mean, when you go into the business of changing the reality, you need to be ready that people will not be so comfortable with that, and people will fight you back. They will not, many people in Israel and in Palestine, you know, they like the current situation. They will not want us to try to shake the boat. And we are planting this idea of humanizing the enemy, and let them see that on the other side there are people that want peace and want to live their lives. It's shaking the world. So we are under attack as an organization, but most importantly, our audience are under attack. The schools that invite us to speak, because we are used to that reality. We're used to being under attack, and this is what we're here for, to change. But for the schools, they are in a much tighter and much more difficult situation. They have the kids, they have the parents, they have the Ministry of Education, they have the local councils that they need to report to. So it needs a courageous schoolmaster and staff to be able to say, yes, we want to hear the other side. We want to bring it to our students. We think they are old enough and wise enough to judge for themselves when they hear such messages. And when they do once, they will not stop it. I mean, when one school invites us for the first time to speak in front of their students, they are so moved and excited with what's happening in the class, and they value the educational value, the educational message that we bring of getting to know the other, not judging, seeing the person behind the TV image or the newspaper image. So they keep inviting us year after year. Now, the attacks are coming from right-wing extremists, whether civilians, organizations, or member of Knesset, and they take several forms. So the first one is they just call, when they hear about an event that's going to take place, they call, they try to speak to the schoolmaster, and they try to intimidate them that it's against the will of the parents, of the children, of the civilians, that we bring, and they use, of course, lies. We bring families of terrorists into the school to influence the minds of the young souls of the students, and they even take more intimidating language when they say, "You need to see what happened to the schoolmaster in that school." Now, if this doesn't work, some schools really take it seriously and they cancel. I mean, we had a cancellation this year, but most schools do not back down. Sorry. And if it happens, they try to organize demonstrations in front of the schools. They bring their supporters. They are very loud. There are not many of them, but they bring loudspeakers, and they spend about an hour in front of the school with flags. And they, of course, invite the TV and all the media channels they can have. Mostly, this is where it ends. I mean, it doesn't go any further so far. They do try to change regulations for the Ministry of Education. So in order to try to prevent us on a more formal way coming from the school to the school, it doesn't work so far. Hope it will not also in the future. What we're trying to do is fight back. I mean, we do not want to really use the term fight back, because this is not a fight. We are doing an educational program, and we will continue to do it as long as there are people who want to hear us. We will try to support them as much as we can with information. The movie you just showed, Shiri, is one example of what we prepare for the teachers and the students to understand what they are going to experience, because some of them have no idea of what's going to take place. So this 10 minutes video is just to show them what's going to happen in the class. We do educational program for the teachers before we come to the class. So the teachers will meet us and see what's going to take place. Also, they get materials to discuss with the students before the class and after the meeting that we do. So we are building a full envelope of support for those schools who are under the attack, who need to resist those movements, and it's helpful. It's going, but it takes a lot of effort and resources to support that.
Thanks, Yuval. And I know, I mean, you said that they're not usually effective, these protests, at getting the schools, or they haven't been yet. They haven't been successful at getting the schools to cancel. I think only one school is canceled, you said. But they come holding signs that say revenge and, don't let terrorists into our schools, and they create a real atmosphere of incitement and fear and hatred, and it's also a reflection of what's happening in some ways in Israeli societies today, but it's also an indication of where things could be going. So thankfully they haven't been effective, but Mohammad, I want you to tell us a little bit about what it's, you're the Palestinian facilitator who these protests are against in many ways. I mean, they're against the parent circle, but they're often, the attacks are, specifically about bringing Palestinians from the West Bank into Israeli Jewish schools. Before you talk, Mohammad, though, I want to make sure that everybody has their English translation on. If you haven't clicked on the globe icon on the bottom and clicked English, you won't be able to understand Mohammad. I didn't introduce Bassem, who is behind this Happy Canada Day image, and he's our translator. So thanks, Bassem, for making it possible today. And Mohammad, tell us a little bit about you. What's your experience like? You've been facilitating these dialogue meetings in Israeli schools for a long time. Tell us what it's been like and what it in the past and what it's like these days.
First, I'd like to thank you, Sherry, for giving me this opportunity to be with you in this webinar. This is very important for me. And first, I'm Mohammad al-Baw. I introduce myself in one word, a Palestinian. And part of what you've heard in the video and what you've seen is to talk about yourself as a Palestinian within this complex situation in 5 minutes only. This is also very difficult, but I'll try to give the highlights, the important things. As a Palestinian, we have many stages in my life, though I'm not old, but I've seen a lot in my life. What happened to me in the first Intifada and how I lost my brother Firas, and also the idea of revenge that I had in my head after I've lost my brother. But in 1 second, I thought I have to do something else totally that will make a change to this conflict, and I chose to be a member of the parents' circle. And I know I selected the hardest way, not the easiest way. And today we have two peoples. Of course, they don't have a love relationship. They have a conflict for decades, and they're still there. And unfortunately, until this point in this conflict, we couldn't solve that conflict. And this way or path that I've selected today is we selected the difficult path that will face many challenges, but I believe in this mission, and I believe in the mission of the parent circle. What my friend Yuval talked about is a small part of what we are facing as Palestinian and Israeli members, as a facilitators for these dialogue meetings, both with Israelis and Palestinians. And as I said, there are many walls between us due to this conflict. It's walls of hatred, of fear, of so many things that were the result of all these years of conflicts. And this is natural as Palestinians and Israelis to have such a reaction. And when the Israeli says, I don't want to listen to the Israeli, because they have one idea about Palestinians, because they never heard a Palestinian speaking. What we lack today is to know each other. And what we are trying here as a parent circle is to build these bridges of knowledge among the two people. And we are doing that in the Israeli schools, within the classes, with the Israeli students. And I personally believe that this is the most important point and the most important thing that we are doing at the parent circle. Any society that to be successful, we need two things. We need to focus on education and how we raise our kids and our children. And what we are working on in both societies is how can I educate our children and to clarify the image for them, and to say there are also other people, like there are Palestinians, there are Israelis, and both want to live. And in each meeting, we say, we are not here to change your thoughts and mindset. We're not here to change the balance. We are just showing you a different aspect, a different perspective of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, a humanitarian perspective that is talking about reality. And we're not talking about politics as a parent circle. We're not a political organization. We are talking from a humanitarian aspect as as talking about the reality that we live. And for the first time, some of them, the mere fact that they are listening to a Palestinian in their school, and once they shake their hand or nod their head, it shows that I've reached their heart. I managed to get into their heart. And I always ask, give me the most difficult class, the ones that are more resisting to have a Palestinian in these classes. I always select these difficult classes because the students in those classes are really don't know anything about us as Palestinians, only the image that is portrayed in the media, in the Israeli media. They look at them as terrorists, but they haven't heard about our narrative, about story. So I always become happy to see how these who refuse to meet me at the beginning, they come at the end and shake hands with me and say, we learned a new thing from you. We heard a new thing. And this is the goal. It's a pure humanitarian purpose, is to build bridges of trust. And this is what we lack, is trust. And the trust is absent between us as two people. And people are losing hope in changing the situation. And things are becoming moving from difficult to be more difficult. And this is causing frustration. But for us, what we are trying to do as Parent Circle is to build these bridges of trust. And I have many examples as personally, I felt that many students gain trust.
Sorry, because I know you have so much to say, but I want you to tell us, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like going to the school when there's a protest? How do you feel when you know that you are going into the mouth of a protest, when you know that there's going to be a protest at a school and people are going to be holding signs saying terrorists, saying revenge, and you're in the car, you're going through the checkpoints, how does that feel? What's that experience like? You've already paid the highest price and now you're doing this. So, I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like.
أكيد طبعاً كفلسطيني.
Of course, as a Palestinian, and I've paid a very high price for this conflict. And it's hard for me to see these Israelis demonstrating and talking to me as a terrorist, and my brother was a terrorist. And this is so annoying. But when I see them demonstrating, I know that this is an indication that what we're doing is successful and that we are on the right track. And those who are demonstrating against me personally, as against the Parents Circle, they are doing a free propaganda for me, and how we can make our voice heard and to make the Parents Circle known to others, maybe about my daily life as a Palestinian. I see all these slogans in my daily life. We see it in settlements, like they say, death to Arabs. But when I see it in a school, it's more difficult. But as I said, this is an indication that we are on the right track. And if you want to be on the right track, you will face a lot of bumps, a lot of challenges, and that's normal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammad. And thank you, Bassem, for translating. Ofer, you are a teacher in a school in the north of Israel. It's also a boarding school of sorts. So tell us a little bit about who the students are in your school. I know you went through one of the Parent Circle's projects called the Narrative Project. And then after that, you were inspired to bring the dialogue meeting to your school. So what was that like, that process? What kind of pushback did you get? Was your school supportive? What challenges did you face? And what was the end result of in the end, we did bring the dialogue meeting to your school. Tell us more about that.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. So yeah, I'll say a few words about the school first. Like Shiri said, it's a combination of a high school and a boarding school where students come from several programs. There are many Russian children who come from, I mean, they're not all Russian. I mean, most of them come from Russia, Ukraine, and they come in a program where they leave their families and they all come around 9th grade and they stay. So, and there are some Ethiopian kids. It's a very diverse school. It takes, it's a regional school, so it takes kids from towns, kibbutzim, all kinds of very diverse environments. And so that also affects, the way the school works. I actually, the parent circle meeting that I was in this time was the second one at the school. The first one I didn't initiate. It was done by one of the managers at the school. And I attended it. It was pretty successful. There was some pushback during the meeting, but not from the students, from the teachers. In my experience, the teachers are usually more opposed to these meetings than the children are, mainly because the children are very ignorant of the whole situation. All of them, I can say safely that none of them have ever spoken to not just a Palestinian, but any Arab. They usually don't know the difference between an Israeli Arab and a Palestinian. And so that they don't know what they're getting into. But on the other hand, they're very, very curious. They're very curious and tense. So the meeting that was held 2 years ago went smoothly, although there was some disturbances from the teachers and some pushback. It never went outside of the school. So there was never any protest outside of the school. And also this time when I initiated the meeting and talked to the principal, for one thing, I was sure she'd say no, because just a week before there was a big protest in Jerusalem in a school and they canceled. And I was sure she'd say, no, I don't want to get in, I don't want this trouble, I don't want this. But to my surprise, she immediately agreed. And I think it has to do with the nature of the school and the location of the school. Jerusalem is always more, it's always a more tense place. It's easy to get protesters there. The students are more active in right-wing organizations, whereas we are basically in a political place. I mean, no one's very active. So there was no reason to get involved or to talk to anyone or to have any kind of protest. So my only worry was that after we had agreed to do it, was that there would be pushback during the sessions, either the preparation sessions for the teachers or the main meeting. And the preparation meeting was indeed, these meetings are always very tense. I mean, teachers are usually opposed to what we do. They don't like it, they don't want it.
Ofer, what's their opposition? Like, what do they say? Why are they against it?
Well, usually they say it's, why don't you bring a right-wing organization to balance? Or they say, in this time, one of the teachers said that, Arabs, he basically said that he doesn't trust whoever will come and doesn't believe them, and their stories are, not very reliable. And there's always a fear that whoever will come is a terrorist. And so that's one of the things that the members of the circle, when they came, they said, there is no terrorists among the Palestinians who are no terrorists or no relative of terrorists. But there's a sense of that, the teachers don't believe this, whatever is happening, and that atmosphere when you come in. But I have to say that it's not all the teachers. I also got a lot of support from many teachers, and all in all, I think the atmosphere was positive. I attended, I went, there were like 4 meetings simultaneously, and I went through them. And it also depends on which class. So they bring the whole class in, usually around 30, although I have some just didn't come. So one of the protests from the students is they just don't show up. Some walk out. They don't make a scene, they just walk out, and we let them. We also didn't want to make a scene. But most stayed, and the atmosphere at the beginning is usually very, very tense. Some of these students are, their parents don't like it. Parents are right-wingers or not even right-wingers. They don't like whatever is happening. They don't believe and trust dialogue or Palestinians. And the children are very tense, and they're very, at least at the beginning, they're very, vehement in their opposition. They don't want to talk. They burst in and they shout, and they don't want to listen. But as the stories progress, they calm down, and then at some point, there's an atmosphere of dialogue. Really, I have to say. First, they listen. So when the members of the circle talk, they just listen. They stop disturbing, and then in the Q&A, some say they voice their opposition. Some voice their support. Some just have questions, which are sometimes very they get, like I said, they get mixed up with Israeli, Arabs, and Palestinians, and they don't really know. So they have a lot of issues about, since they're going to the army, they have a lot of natural defensiveness about what they'll be doing. But at that point, it's usually very polite, and the room is very charged. You can feel that something important is happening. Just the dialogue, just the encounter, listening, talking.
Yeah,
and
we call that. Go ahead. You want to finish up?
And afterwards, they continue talking usually. Either the teachers or the members or the students or the members. And every time when I talk to students afterward, they say that this was one of the most powerful experience they've had during their entire time at the school.
You touched upon something, Ofer, that the preparation meeting, and that's something that we've been doing in the past few years, is meeting with the teachers and the administration before the dialogue meeting. Often that neutralizes some of the fears and the tensions and the questions that the teachers have. So I think that has been an important step forward in our work and helping to get some more teachers on board. So
let me just say that the most important step before the meeting is the preparation of the students. So after the preparation with the teachers, there's an hour that's committed to talking to the students and just explaining what's going to happen, doing some exercises and listening. Just Israelis, they're not very patient anyway. They can't wait to say what they think. So we do some exercises, just trying to listen and wait and be patient and try to hear what the other person is saying and then talk. And this is, I think, the most important part, because then they're not going into something that's totally unknown and then scary. And they have a sense of, what at least what the shape of the meeting will be.
There's a lot of questions coming into the Q&A. We're gonna take some questions now. So if you have them, please feel free to put them in. Yuval, I think there's a few questions in here about the Ministry of Education and the sort of the school administration and what people, what the government is doing to, well, here the question asks, why isn't the ministry doing anything to kick the extremists off of school property? Why aren't the administrators doing anything to kick the protesters off of the school property? So can you talk a little bit about that?
First, demonstration never take place on the school property. They are always in front, where it's either on the street or in the neighborhood, but never inside the school. So the students are really alert. I mean, they know that something's taking place outside. They are really curious, but sometimes they are not allowed to go and to join, but some schools do let them, if they want, to join the demonstration. In one occasion it happened. Well, I think the Ministry of Education is trying to avoid, the law does not allow the Ministry of Education to really prohibit that, because this is considered an allowed program. They have, like today, more than 5,000 programs that are external for the school. I know it's a bit complicated situation, and I'm not sure if in the States this is also the situation where schools can invite external organizations, either NGOs or commercial. They are trying to change that. We need to really follow up and see what's going to take place, whether they're going to pass a regulation that we are not allowed. But for that moment, we have an agreement with the Ministry of Education that unless these families or these have not lost somebody who was involved in terrorist actions, there's no reason to prevent them from coming to the school. And most of our members have lost people in the conflict. I mean, the Palestinians that were not involved in any violent action. In fact, we have a dilemma here, because on one point we do follow this agreement with the Ministry of Education, and we all our members that come to the schools, the members, the brothers, fathers, whoever was killed was not involved in any violent action. On the other way, what we're preaching for is that whoever was subject to such a violent event in their life, to lose somebody, and then no matter what circumstances my brother or father was killed, if I take the path of peace and willing to speak with the enemy students about peace and about reconciliation, then you should allow them to come. So we don't challenge that, okay? We know that we must follow the sentiment in Israel and do not bring members, even if they change their mind and they now support peace and support nonviolence. But this is very delicate. And I want to add something I know that for now, all the schools that invite or invite us to speak to did not back. I mean, they stood for and resist all the intimidations. But our greatest fear is that other schools who never tried that before would consider not inviting us just to avoid all this hassle, all this mess. I know that they have a lot of opportunities to educate their students, and if they're not looking for really challenging and threatening announcements on the voicemail, they will just avoid it, and that's the greatest fear that we have. And it's a loss of really educational value, as Ofer said. In the preparation that they do for the students, they don't just learn to listen to Palestinians, they learn to listen to each other. They learn to listen to somebody who thinks different, whose life is different. And this is something that is a fundamental and asset in education.
Thanks, Yuval. Mohammad, we're getting a lot of questions about dialogue meetings in Palestine. So people are asking about if we do dialogue meetings in Palestinian schools, which we do not, and you can explain. And so if not, then where are we doing dialogue meetings in Palestine? And what kind of resistance do we get for dialogue meetings in Palestine? How are we dealing with it there?
مهم جدا قبل ما
It is very important before answering your question, which is very important, but you can't compare between people living under occupation and people living in their own like state, democratic state. But despite everything, for us as Parent Circle, we're trying to access the Palestinian students. We tried to reach 3 schools in Jerusalem, and I talked to, we had like Israelis going to schools, and it was the same question, but from the other side, and saying like, telling the Israelis, you are doing the wrong thing to Palestinians. But we tried to have meetings, informal meetings outside schools, meetings with women groups, with youth groups at universities that were very important. I'll give you one example with some university students who were a big group of them. That was the first time to hear an Israeli talking to them and hearing their personal stories about their loss, because the only Israeli that they see on daily basis, either the soldier or the settler. And this is the only Israelis they encounter on daily basis. For me, I have 4 kids. And when I ask about my kids about the Israelis they know, they just say the soldiers and the settlers on our land next to us. So the meetings with the Palestinians are also very important. And despite all the challenges and difficulties, we are trying to increase these meetings in the Palestinian society and try to access as many students as possible in East Jerusalem. The Ministry of Education in Israel is different than the Ministry of Education in Palestine. In Israel, in Israel, it's the principal who decides whether to have these meetings or not. But in Palestine, it's more complicated. You have to get approval first from the minister to have such meetings, and whether they will accept or not, or whether they can host you or not under the circumstances. When one Palestinian tells me like, you are coming here to talk about peace, and for me as a Palestinian that I live under occupation, I'm not the occupier, I'm living under occupation, why don't you go to the other side who doesn't want peace? And this is kind of discussions that we face, and these meetings are important to know the other side, to hear the Israeli pain and the loss they had, and to see them as a human. What the incident that made me join the Parent Circle is I heard them and the story of an Israeli mother, and she talked about the pain of losing her son. And I used to think that there's a difference between them, the Israelis losing their kids, and us. But when I heard it's the same pain, it's the same suffering, I decided to join, and that changed my life.
Thank you, Mohammad. Thank you. There are some questions, Ofer, for you, but before we get to that, there are questions also about bringing dialogue meetings to other schools. And I want to let everybody here know that you can bring dialogue meetings to your communities in the US. So we offer virtual dialogue meeting programs to not so much schools in the US, but more adult communities. So if you have a community that you're a part of, whether it's a church or a synagogue or a university, a mosque, or a book group even we do, you can invite the parent circle and you can host 2 people like Yuval and Mohammad to come share their stories and do a dialogue meeting like they hear in schools. Ofer, people are asking, and maybe Mohammad, you know too, since you're in the schools a lot, what are some of the like common questions that the kids are asking? And also people are asking about parent-teacher organizations, and you know, whether, Ofer, if you have a parent-teacher organization in your school, and you know how we've tried to utilize that organization to help with our efforts?
So there is a parents organization. It's not very active. We didn't utilize it. We didn't really need to. I think my personal opinion is that it would just get in the way because, like I said, the grown-ups are usually the ones who are causing trouble more than young kids, like in life. So I think we should just keep it as simple as possible. And when you let all kinds of other elements come in and say what they think, it usually just complicates I mean, in my personal opinion, the less people involved, the better.
And do you think your school will continue to bring the parent circle?
I think so. I think we planned on bringing them annually. So just having a regular, next year, my own personal class that I teach is going to be in 12th grade, and I'm, positive that I will try to bring them. And I think these meetings are so positive, and this one went so smoothly that I don't see why we wouldn't want to bring them on a regular basis.
Yeah, good. I hope so. Mohammad, what are some of the questions that the Israeli kids ask you?
يعني كتير بيسألوك
Many of them ask, as a Palestinian, what does it mean to be a Palestinian? What is Palestine? You are living now in Israel. So you as a Palestinian, you have to talk about your nationality, your identity. Talk to them about Hebron, where I live today. They might be a simple question, but they stem out from lack of knowledge, and they ask, what's the difference between you as Palestinians living in Hebron and those Palestinians living in Nazareth or Haifa? And they always ask, what is occupation? We're not occupying you. This is our land and you are here, but this is our land as the state of Israel. So when you say that there are 14 million people, half of them are Palestinians, half of them are Israelis, many things are not clear to them. And when you talk about what means, what occupation means, what the settlements mean, and how we live under fear all the time, this is very important. I remember one question, maybe I laughed at it in the class when he said, what is the currency that you are dealing with in Palestine? And I told him it's Japanese yen. And I explained to him that we are living in the same space. There's only from my house, your school, there's 1 hour by car, but you don't know anything about my life. You don't know about the life of our children, anything. And that's why I'm here today, so that you can ask and learn about us. And when you go home, you think with yourself about your life, your future, because for you as an Israeli student, you are part of that conflict. And one day you will be part of that conflict. And many of the students that I talk to them in the schools, I met them at checkpoints.
Yeah.
So I believe that the change starts from knowing the others and to understand what's going around you. And this is what's important. Sherry, there are many questions that we are being asked as Palestinians, and these are not just simple, but when they ask, do you have like malls, big shops, do you have supermarkets? So it's natural for people who don't know anything about you to ask such basic questions.
Yeah, it's so important. And I wish so many more people and students would have the opportunity to meet Palestinians as human beings, because really there is a total cutoff and there is no opportunity. You have to make a very big effort to meet a Palestinian as a human being. as an Israeli. And I wish we could bring this program to more schools. There are questions about how you can support us. The dialogue meeting program, and Yuval, I want to give you the closing words, but before that, I want to tell you that the dialogue meeting program is our oldest program, the longest standing program. We've been doing it for 20 years. It is consistently underfunded. The more funding that we can get, the more schools we can reach. Somebody asked here about organizations that we are working with. We have a lot of great partnerships with the Mechinot, with Israeli youth movements, and also working all the time to strengthen our relationship with schools. Unfortunately, because of the sort of radicalizing environment and atmosphere in Israel, we have to work even harder. So we have to bring in somebody special to, who is dedicated to reaching out to schools and making relationships and trying to find new schools who are willing to take us on. We have to create this video to market our program. We have to, train more and more members to become dialogue meeting facilitators so they can go into the school. So you can always support us with a donation. Christopher is going to put the link in the chat. I want to thank everyone for being here today, especially to our panelists. Especially to you, Mohammad, who continues to go into the schools despite these awful situations. Yuval, what are we closing with today? Oh, but you got to unmute, so if you want us to hear you.
The fact that we are talking here that this program is under attack and specifically the schools. And I mean, we have, as I said, we have many programs, but this program specifically is targeted by right extremists. The fact that is because it's effective. It's one program that goes straight into your heart, and in a moment of the life of the students where they are curious and open, and the fact that it is so effective and it's so influential really brings a lot of objection from the extremists. They do not want this truth to be heard in school. They do not want the students to know that on the other sides, there are human beings that want peace. They will do everything they can to prevent it. They will lie, they will intimidate, and they will demonstrate. And we are there just to support the schools, to support the students, and to bring this message forward as much as we can. So really, I want to thank all of you. I don't know how many came today, but thank you for listening to us. Thank you for your support. I mean, this is really something that we feel here. Through Shir, through the friends in the US, we do know that there's a tremendous amount of help coming from moral help and financial help and political help, and that really keeps us going. So thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you all guys for being here today, and Bassem for translating. There will be a recording that we will share, and Christopher, thank you so much for all of your work behind the scenes. There'll be a recording that we'll share, and the video, the link to the video we'll send around as well. It's also in the chat. Please share with other people about our program. Please share the recording, and thank you all for being here and for your support.
Thank you, Shir.
I would like to say, Mohammad would like to say something.
Yes, Mohammed.
I just want to conclude by one word, saying it's very important to know that bridge that we are trying to build among us, this of trust and knowledge, and we need to be faithful in what we are doing, and our life is not always black and white, and we have the gray that we also and I always end the meetings in one word, and we say that we live on the hope of changing the reality, and as humans we can maybe live without food for 40 days and without water for days and without oxygen for minutes, but without hope we can't live even for a few seconds, and we live on the hope of changing this reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. We hope so too.
Shukran.
Shukran.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
يعطيك العافية.